The night had fallen heavy over the Arizona plains, and the desert wind carried a strange, almost mournful whisper. Inside a lonely cabin miles from the nearest town, a man named Silas Boone sat sharpening his knife by lamplight, unaware that behind the wooden door of his old wardrobe, a pair of eyes watched his every move. The woman hiding there had not blinked in hours. Her heart beat so fast she could hear it echo in her own skull. She'd been there since sunset, silent, motionless, invisible. He didn't know she existed. Not yet. They said the West was a land of ghosts, and that night Silas Boone was sharing his home with one. He was a cowboy of the rougher kind, broad-shouldered, scarred across his jaw, the sort of man who spoke little and trusted less. Once long ago, he'd fought in the frontier wars, riding with the cavalry through Apache country. He had seen things then, done things he didn't speak about. Now he kept to himself, herding cattle, mending fences, drinking alone by the fire. But even the loneliest man needs a routine, and Silas had one. Every night he would set down his hat, unbuckle his gun belt, and strip off his dust-stained clothes before washing up with a bucket of cold water. And every night, since she'd hidden there, the woman in his wardrobe had watched him. Her name was Nayeli. In her tongue it meant, "I love you," though love was the furthest thing from her mind. She'd been running for 2 days, hunted like an animal through the rocks and sagebrush. Her people had been attacked by soldiers near the San Pedro River, men in blue coats, rifles gleaming in the sun. Her brother had been shot dead, her mother captured. Nayeli had escaped only by leaping into the river and drifting downstream until her body was half frozen and her spirit half dead. When she stumbled upon the cabin, the door was unlocked, the man was gone, and she was too weak to keep moving. She crawled inside, found the wardrobe, and pulled it shut. She planned to rest for a few hours, then slip away before dawn. But then she heard footsteps. The cowboy had returned. Since that night, she hadn't dared move. Every creak of the floorboards felt like thunder in her ears. She could smell his soap, his tobacco, the faint leather of his saddle. She watched his shadow through the slats of the wardrobe door. And as the days passed, her fear began to twist into something stranger, a fascination. He was nothing like the soldiers who'd hunted her people. His movements were patient, deliberate, almost gentle. He spoke to his horse outside, called it Dusty in a low, soft tone. Sometimes at night, she could hear him mutter words to himself, confessions, perhaps, or memories. One evening, as he undressed by lamplight, she noticed the scar across his ribs, old and deep, the kind made by a knife, and she realized he was not as strong as he seemed. For 4 nights she hid there. She didn't eat, barely drank from the water jug when he was gone. Her wounds itched, the gash on her shoulder throbbed, but she stayed silent. Then came the 5th morning. Silas Boone opened the wardrobe to fetch a clean shirt and froze. For a long, breathless second, the world went still. The faint smell of sweat and pine soap filled the air between them. Her dark eyes locked on his, wide and terrified. Her hair was tangled, her skin pale beneath streaks of dirt, and in her hand she held a small knife, shaking, useless, but ready. He blinked, disbelief hardening into instinct. His hand went for his gun, but she leapt forward, stumbling as her legs gave out. The knife clattered across the floor, and she crumpled at his boots. Jesus Almighty! He breathed. Blood had soaked through the fabric wrapped around her shoulder. She tried to speak, but only managed to whisper before her head hit the floor. Silas stood there a moment, heart pounding. The gun in his hand felt heavy, too heavy. Slowly, he knelt beside her, touched her neck, and felt a pulse. Weak, but still there. He carried her to his bed, laid her down, and cleaned the wound. It looked days old, infected red with fever. He boiled water, tore strips from a clean shirt, and dressed it the best he could. When she stirred, she flinched from his touch like a wild thing. "Easy," he said quietly. "Ain't gonna hurt you." For a moment, she met his gaze, suspicious, uncertain, then drifted into sleep. The days that followed were silent, but heavy with tension. She slept most of the time, muttering in her language, sometimes crying out in her dreams. When she woke, she watched him warily, never trusting, always alert. He fed her broth, left water by the bed, and spoke only when necessary. But every night, as the fire burned low, he found himself staring at her across the room, wondering who she was, where she came from, and why she'd chosen his home. When she was strong enough to walk again, she tried to leave. She made it to the door before her voice broke the silence. "Why help me?" she asked. Her English was rough, but her meaning clear. Silas looked up from his chair. "'Cause you needed it," she frowned. "You soldier?" He paused. "Was." Her expression hardened. "You killed my people." He didn't deny it. "I was there. Didn't want it, but it happened." She turned away, tears glinting in her eyes. He didn't try to stop her. But that night, she didn't leave. She stayed. Over the next few weeks, something began to shift. She spoke more, teaching him words in Apache. He taught her a few in English. She laughed once, a small sound, quick and shy, and it startled them both. Sometimes she'd sit by the window, staring out at the horizon, humming songs he didn't understand. Other times, he'd find her studying him quietly, the same way she had in those first secret nights. But neither spoke about the truth, about why she'd come to his cabin in the first place. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Silas found her by the fire, staring into the flames. He poured himself a cup of coffee and said, "I reckon you ain't told me your full story." She didn't answer at first. Then softly, "You remember the raid by the river? The boy shot with the red headband?" He felt the blood drain from his face. "That boy was my brother," she said. Silas stared at her, throat tightening. He remembered that boy, small, quick, terrified. He remembered the shot. He hadn't pulled the trigger, but he'd done nothing to stop it either. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Nayeli nodded slowly. "I come to find the man who killed him. I followed the tracks. They led here. When I saw your face, I wanted to kill you." Her eyes were sharp as flint, her voice trembling with the weight of truth. "But I saw you were alone. I saw your scar. You carry your ghosts too." Silas set the cup down, his hands shaking. "If you still want revenge, I won't stop you." He took off his gun belt, laid it on the table. "I've done things worth dying for." The room went quiet. Only the fire crackled between them. Nayeli stood, walked toward him and reached out. Instead of taking the gun, she placed her hand on his chest. "No," she said softly. "You helped me live. That is enough." He closed his eyes, a breath leaving him that felt like forgiveness. Spring melted into summer. The desert turned gold again. They stayed together in that cabin, two souls from different worlds, finding a fragile kind of peace. He taught her to ride his horse, to shoot a rifle, to read a few English words. She taught him how to pray to the wind, how to listen to the earth, but peace in the West never lasted. One morning, a troop of soldiers rode up to the cabin. They were searching for escaped hostiles. Their commander, young, proud, blind with duty, demanded Silas hand her over. He looked them dead in the eye and said, "Ain't no Apache woman here." They searched the cabin anyway. One soldier kicked open the wardrobe door, finding only shirts and a saddle blanket. When they rode away, Silas turned to tell her it was over. But she was gone. The trapdoor beneath the wardrobe was open, leading to the narrow crawl space below the floorboards, the same place she had first hidden when she entered his life. He waited hours, but she didn't return. Days passed, then weeks. One evening, as the sun bled over the hills, he saw something fluttering on his porch post, a feather, black-tipped and tied with a strand of hair. Beneath it, carved into the wood, were two small symbols in Apache. He didn't know what they meant until he looked them up later. "I see you." He stood there for a long time, hat in hand, staring into the fading light. Somewhere out there she was alive, and though she was gone, the memory of her eyes watching him from the dark, her voice whispering forgiveness, and her feather waving in the wind stayed with him all his days. They said the plains were quiet that summer, too quiet. But in one lonely cabin outside Prescott, the ghosts of two worlds had found peace in the silence. And for the rest of his life, every time Silas Boone opened that old wardrobe, He half expected to see her there, watching him change just like before.